Awesome. So I am super excited to introduce our final speaker of the night. So our final speaker is named Nadeem Nathoo, and he is the founder of the Knowledge Society. Here are 3 fun facts that you probably don't know about Nadeem. So he actually climbed Mount Fiji in shorts and a t-shirt, and he thought he was gonna have to amputate his pinky because it was so cold. He lived in Bangladesh for 2 months, working with the founder of microfinance and Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus. During that time, he ate 1 bag of Lay's chips and 1 bottle of Coke every day for that entire month because the water and the food was unsafe. And he's super impulsive. He thinks that his amygdala is broken, and there's always a 1% chance higher that if he's in a group, that something bad is gonna happen. But there's always a 100% higher chance of good times. Nadeem, come on up here and share your fuck up.
All right. So I run a company called TKS, the Knowledge Society. The idea behind it is we're completely rethinking the way young people learn and develop the knowledge, skills, mindsets, and networks they need to solve some really important problems in the world. Actually, if you do a thought exercise, right? Like imagine there was a king or queen of the world, right? And imagine their main KPI was to optimize quality of life for people. Does that feel like a good KPI to have for a king or queen of the world, right? So imagine every week this king or queen got this list of all the things that were adversely affecting quality of life, right? So there was like poverty, mental health, climate change, like all this stuff. And imagine them looking at this list and being like, I'm just gonna let my royal subjects figure it out without any help and without any context of looking at this list. That's our world. Like that's the world that we live in, right? So we felt like, okay, we need to institutionalize this and figure out a way to kind of build this infrastructure. But how do we get there? Like we're just 2 kids from Calgary, so I thought it was worth giving you some context. Growing up, my brother and I, so we were always ambitious, but we never really knew why, and that came a little bit later, but we always had a deep desire to serve. Spent a lot of time in developing countries, so I mentioned that we were in Bangladesh working with Muhammad Yunus, and this is when I was like 19 years old, and I emailed him randomly like 5 times until he said yes. It was like one of those stories, right? And then finally got there. By the way, craziest experiences of my life. Like I mentioned that we were eating or drinking a bottle of Coke and 1 bag of ketchup chips a day because the water had arsenic in it. So you had to wake up every morning and listen to the radio to see if you could take a shower if there was like not enough arsenic in the water so that you could do it. You had to like spray the cockroaches off. This is too much. I remember lying down on a wooden plank in a village and staring up at the roof. It's like 40 degrees. There's a bunch of mosquitoes. The mosquito net's not working. I see this tarantula. It's literally like this big, okay? It's this huge, and like the roof is right here, and I'm on this plank. And I look on the other side of the room, and there's a big lizard. And my saving grace, like I was daydreaming. I was like, maybe this lizard will eat this tarantula, right? Like that was my life. Man, people are living like that every single day. So that was nuts. And that taught me an important lesson about gratitude, which I'm going to get to a little bit later. So did some of that stuff. I worked in Tajikistan that's in Central Asia, building early childhood development centers. Super random. Like this woman, this is just like high net worth individual was like, I want to invest millions of dollars in building, ECDs. And we're like asking her questions like, where are you going to build it? How are you going to get the kids? Like, what is the curriculum? How are you going to recruit teachers? She's like, oh, I haven't really thought about that. And I was like, okay, listen, send me down there. Like, we'll figure this out for you, right? So this is when we were still fairly young as well. Worked in play. And I just put this picture up. You can't really see it super well, but I just thought it was a cute picture. Like, look at this kid. He's just this is his first time ever seeing a camera or like an iPad, and I was like, man, it's super cute. But we were I worked in places like Honduras, East Africa, like all this stuff, right? And throughout that time, we had a deep realization that this is the first time in human history where people can actually have people can impact billions at scale. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Like 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, if you wanted to impact billions, you had to be like a conqueror or like a Galileo or an Einstein. It was almost like a prerequisite to be dead to have impact, right? Whereas today, you can write a couple lines of code and give financial literacy to everybody. You could write a couple lines of code and like take down governments, right? Impact works both ways, but you can do that at scale, is my point, is everybody has that opportunity to be able to do that. And what's interesting, when I was in Bangladesh, and I don't want to spend too much time on the context, but when I was in Bangladesh, I remember being in a school, and I asked myself, I was like, what is the percent chance that somebody in this room is going to be able to impact billions? Like, there was no chance. Like, the teachers didn't even know what the content was. It was almost 0%. And a couple of years later, when I started TKS, I actually went back to my school in Calgary. I got invited to speak there. And I asked myself that same question. What is the probability that someone in this room will go on to impact billions? It was still close to 0. That's fucked up, right? Like, we have all these resources. We have access to the internet. We have access to people. We speak English, and most of the content that's available online is in English. And still have a 0% chance. So my brother and I worked at McKinsey for a little while, ended up moving into San Francisco, worked in crypto for a little bit, yada, yada. My brother started a company called Airpost, got acquired by Box, and he was, leading AI for $1 billion company, which is hilarious because when he first started this company, he didn't even know the difference between a designer and developer. Like, he hired a designer, paid them $15,000 to develop his back end. 4 years later, he's the head of AI at a multi-billion-dollar company, right? So we're down in the valley, and we're waking up to self-driving cars every single day, a bunch of our friends doing cool stuff, and we asked ourselves, what if we had $10 billion in the bank? How do we spend our time? I think this is a very important question for everyone to ask. Essentially, if you had unlimited resources, what would you do with your time? Another way to actually ask this question is, what is your ambition? So I asked my friend. She works at a major bank. I'm not going to name which bank it is, but she's so damn smart. I trust her a lot. I actually want to hire her. But she's doing something that she kind of likes, whatever. She doesn't feel like she's around a lot of smart people. And I asked her, what's your ambition? She's like, I want to, without hesitation, right? She's like, I want to impact 100 million people. I was like, why 100 million? She's like, just a big number. Meaningfully impact 100 million people. So I was like, okay, at your current trajectory here at the bank, even if you became the CEO of the bank, do you think you'll be able to meaningfully impact 100 million people? She's like, no. But I can learn the skills and blah, 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 build relationships, all that here, and then I can go somewhere else, and then I can maybe impact 100 million people. I was like, okay. So what you're saying is that it's possible that you'll impact 100 million people. She's like, yeah. I was like, how crazy does that sound? I was like, you need to get out of possible land into possible land, right? Like, you can learn in possible land. You can build relationships in possible land. Like, she was just mitigating risk. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But for us, when we asked that $10 billion question, it's, we're all of a sudden in possible land because we were both, when I was at McKinsey, I was in possible land. When Naveed, was working at Box, that was possible land. For us, we wanted to impact billions. So there were 3 problems that we wanted to solve. The first was affordable housing, which I was working on. The second was access to diagnostics and drugs. And the third was food production. So like the impossible food, soy lands, vertical farmings in the world, right? They were all trying to tackle this in different ways. And we realized that there was a massive infrastructure problem in education. Because say we dedicated the rest of our lives to solve one of these problems. We completely knocked it out of the park, right? It doesn't exist anymore. What about these hundreds of other problems that are impacting billions? Well, our current strategy as a civilization is cross our fingers, hold our breath, and hope that someone comes along to solve these problems. That seemed crazy to us, so we started TKS. So that's the whole preamble. The reason why I spent a lot of time on that is so you guys know that this is my fucking life mission, okay? It's my life mission. It's not like I got into a car accident, I spent all this money on this car or whatever. Like, that stuff matters, that maybe I lost my car and I spent a lot of time on that. But for me, I have a deep desire and passion to do this stuff, and I almost lost it. So I'm about to get into what I call, or what I put down here, fuck up level 3. I didn't put fuck up level 5 because I was like, what's fuck up? I feel like murder is fuck up level 5. You know what I mean? I was like, who's fuck up level 5? I don't know. So this is when we started TKS, and everything was going beautifully. We tested our hypothesis. Seemed to work really well. We were getting the kids. In fact, when we started, we didn't even know what we were going to do. We're like, let's get the kids first, and then let's figure it out, right? And we were seeing all these crazy outcomes in a short period of time. People speaking at conferences all over the world, getting internships at places like IBM, Microsoft, at 14, 15, 16 years old. One of our kids built a ring that can non-invasively measure blood glucose and cholesterol levels without penetrating the skin. It's like real-time monitoring of heart disease and diabetes. It's like real-life Theranos that actually works, right? And this kid's like 19 years old now, and he was 16 when he started. So like all this crazy stuff. Here's the problem. The problem with Naveed and myself, who's my brother, is we're really good at persuading people, including ourselves. So we're like smooth talkers to people, right? And we like can talk about our vision very well. And then we had this one line. This line fucked us, okay? It was, we want to completely rethink learning 2.0 in all aspects, from the curriculum, the people in front of the room, and the environment. And we said this thing where, like, Google completely rethought the workplace with the Googleplex, right? They figured out what the workplace 2.0 looks like, but nobody's really cracked what learning 2.0 looks like from the environment perspective. We say that to people, like investors and all that stuff. They're like, oh, shit, that's sick. And we're like, yeah, that is pretty sick, right? No one's really rethought what learning 2.0 looks like. So we kept saying this to a lot of people. People got excited. People invested. We're like, let's build this space. Multi-million-dollar project. Let's be the first one in the world to do it. So this is the start of that, okay? So we get this space. This is the team. We're getting all this recognition, right? So there's like Biz Now and like all these like different articles or whatever. This is a real estate thing. I don't even know where that shirt is anymore. But let me give you can see how shitty this space looks, right? Like I'm gonna show you this video quickly, and I'm just gonna talk about it in the back. We walk in here, like which idiot walks in here and was like, this is the one. This is the one I want, right? We are those idiots. Look at this fucking space. There's like no HVAC. All this stuff is broken. The floor isn't leveled. We had to figure out in 6 months. We had no construction background, right? We had to figure out in 6 months how we were going to turn this ugly duckling into something amazing. So what do? We're like, oh, we're smart people. We'll figure it out, right? That attitude worked for a really long time, and I'm going to talk about the nuances and the lessons here where that might not work. So we're like, okay, let's get some of the best people in the real estate space. Let's get some of the best people in the design space. How many of you guys have heard of Allied Properties? So like they own like all the brick and beam buildings in Canada. The founder of Allied, he's been through like hundreds, if not thousands of real estate deals. He was one of our investors at the time. He was one of our mentors. We got him on board. We're like, check. We literally got the best person. We got one of the best designers in the world to build our space. Check. Best architect, whatever. We're like, we could put together this awesome team. Let's figure it out. Let me show you. Like, these are the early renderings. The most recent renderings are way better. I just couldn't find them in time. But this is what the space looked like. Okay, so you walk in, and we got really excited about this, right? You go up these stairs, and it kind of connects the middle floor and the top, and it goes bottom, and all that is green grass wall. And then these stairs coming up here, so they're bleacher seatings, and you can kind of see this TV, but it goes all the way up here, and there's another meeting room. There's like a floating blue pod, so like, I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but see this like blue thing up there? That's like this floating blue pod. It's like a meeting room. It overlooks the space. All the stuff down here is green. Very intentional. So like this is the discussion and collaboration zone and all that stuff. So we built by design. So this was like the get shit done room, and these things like folded up against the wall, and so did these. Like it was really, really cool. And I'm gonna quickly just go through this. Like we were gonna have this in Toronto, and this was like a sick presentation space, multi-million-dollar project, okay? We did not have multi-million dollars. We're like, we'll figure it out in the account. So we start building. The budget was like $800K to $1.5 million. Okay, so we go through this whole thing. We have the best team. We have 2 code consultants. We think we're doing everything right. The last day, when the city has to sign off on whether we can start building, they tell us that our ramp to go up is like 3 degrees off. So we're not going to approve this thing. And by the way, you're going to have to get an elevator in your space because it needs to be fully wheelchair accessible, which we've been doing this for like 3 months. And we had 2 code consultants. Everyone told us it was okay. The city told us it was okay, all this stuff. We had to put in another bathroom, and it had to be a fully wheelchair accessible bathroom. all this stuff added $2 million to the cost. Now, this is one of those fuck-ups that you don't know you fucked up until like the last minute. Because all this, so the elevator, they're like, you're gonna have to add this elevator. And we're like, okay, we'll add the elevator. And they're like, you gotta do this bathroom. It's like, okay. And they're like, you can't actually do the grass on the floor. You gotta do something else, and it's gonna be a little bit more expensive. We're like, okay, right? And all this stuff happened, and it was the day we were about to press play. Like all construction was gonna happen. We had all our contractors on board. Actually, one of our contractors, you're not allowed to start construction until you actually sign the document, okay? But we were on a time crunch, and one of our contractors wanted to lay the flooring for us, and they took initiative to just break the rules and do it first because they're like, and it was well-intentioned, right? And I really appreciate the idea behind it, but they were like, oh, we're gonna lay the flooring, and they tell us after that we did it, but that was the day where we decided actually not to do it and to break the lease. And it was a multi-million-dollar lease. And we were on the hook for the present value of that multi-million-dollar lease. Plus, now our contractor's like, oh, you gotta pay us for the work that we did, even though you didn't tell us to do it, but we were trying to be nice, and we did it before you signed the stuff. So there's like money problems on this side. And then to get out of the lease, it costed around $2 million. So we had some choice. So now it got to a point where we were like really excited about all this stuff. Not to mention we're running TKS at this time in Toronto, so most of our mental energy is spent on building this frickin' space that we didn't really actually give a shit about because it was about the program and it was about the learning and it was about the training. All the, like, okay, I've never felt anxiety in my life until this point. I was one of those fortunate people, like I didn't know what it was. And I was like feeling anxiety every single day here, and so was my brother. And this was like over a couple-month period. And so we fucked up on a lot of things, on the program, hiring people, all that stuff. This is where the money went. And now I'm looking at this lease break agreement. These guys are threatening to sue us, all this stuff. Point is, we were looking at potentially our life mission just being like washed away over like a stupid building. A building was gonna like take us down, right? So for us, this was just like a really crazy experience. And I think what's really important, and specifically what I wanted to focus on in this fuck-up night, is like, how do you actually, so what are the lessons? Like, how do you avoid a lot of this stuff? Because what Marsha said is right, is that it's either you're right or you learned. Like, there's no such thing as failure, right? You're right or you learned. And so what are all the key learnings that we took away from this? And there's two ways that I'd separate it. There's like things that happen to you, which you can't control, and there's things that happen by you. I think most things happen by you. And then some of the things that happen to you, it's like whatever, you just adapt, right? So a lot of the stuff is in your head. So the first lesson is have a decision-making framework, okay? Let me give you an example of what's not a good decision-making framework. When I was in high school, I told you I was like a really ambitious kid, and I had like good grades and stuff, but I didn't know why. I had to make a decision of where I wanted to go to university. My decision-making framework was, my brother has a car, I don't like shopping, and we fit into the same clothes, I'm gonna go to Western. That's a bad decision-making framework. Another bad decision-making framework is like, fuck it, let's build this multi-million-dollar building without no information. That's a bad decision-making framework. A good decision-making framework, as an example, is if this were to go wrong, why would it go wrong? If this were to go wrong, why would it go wrong? Sit down, write it out. Like, I'm all for bias towards action, but like, there is some, this sounds crazy me saying it out loud, there is some merit in being thoughtful, right? Like, I think some of you guys might fall on the other spectrum where you're overthinking. Like, overthinking is not the same as being thoughtful, right? But when you're in it, it's hard. For us, like, we just have a natural bias towards action. So we're like, screw it, let's just do this stuff. But actually having a good decision-making framework and being thoughtful about what that is. And by the way, there's like tons of books and stuff online. We can just read it, but it's just being very intentional about it. So that's the first thing. Have you guys heard the phrase, done is better than perfect, right? We realize here, yes, that's true, but done is not better than correct. There needs to be a certain level of like functionality that you get to for it to be considered done and not some like crap, like, you know, just like random things that are just there. And so for us, we're like, yeah, we're just gonna figure it out. We're gonna have all this stuff in place. We're gonna get this designers or whatever. But the whole project that we put together, it wasn't even close to being done. It was just like random things put together. And I think that's really important, is figuring out what done enough looks like. The third is, and this is gonna be controversial to a lot of people, but I don't think excitement for a lot of things is good, because excitement implies lack of information. Okay? So like, say you really wanted to go to Wonderland and ride a roller coaster, right? You might be excited. If you rode the roller coaster 30 times, you're not gonna be as excited, right? This is the controversial part. So I see like a lot of people excited to get married, right? And you can be excited about the wedding. You can be excited about the wedding. You can be excited about the dress. You can be excited about certain things, but excited about getting married and spending the rest of your life together, to me, think about it. It implies a lack of information. If you propose and you're like, yeah, it's gonna be the same shit, whatever, that's a good sign, in my opinion. Then you know that person. And actually, a couple of my friends now are no longer together. They got married and they got divorced. And I was like, man, they were really, really excited when they were about to get married. I'm just saying. So we were really excited about building this project, but that implied a lack of information, right? So, like, riding a roller coaster is good to have a lack of information, right? The downside is very low. So thinking about when you are excited, is it something that's really important, and how do you just get more information? And then the last thing, man, this is so damn key. Gratitude pretty much solves all problems. I remember walking down the street, and my brother was freaking out. He was freaking out, and we had to make the call to the real estate agents to be like, now we're gonna break this and go through this whole like potential litigation process and all that stuff. And I turned to him, I was like, did anyone die? Are you healthy? Life is freaking good, okay? We get to go through this experience, right? We get to be like 20-something-year-old kids building a multi-million-dollar project, trying to like develop education 2.0 to solve some really hard problems, all that stuff. Like, we have access to water, roads, friends, infrastructure, family that loves us. All these problems that happen to us, they're self-made. They're just in our head. And then you go back and you think about these kids in Bangladesh living with this tarantula on top of them. You're like, man, life could be way worse, right? This is all part of the journey. Fucking up is all part of the journey. Imagine, like, say you knew everything that was going to happen to you in life, and you knew it was going to be perfect and all that stuff. Like, you saw the movie. You knew the ending before you saw the movie. It's like, whatever. This is like a little bit more philosophical, but it's just like, this is the beauty of life. Like, shit happens, and you adapt to it. And yeah, if you're unhealthy and like all that stuff, and maybe you have, you know, if something like really happens to you and your life is on the line, yes, that's something to really feel shitty about. But I think other than that, and unless you've experienced a significant, like, you know, thing of loss, I think you could use this as a tool to really come back from that. So I don't want to take too much of your time. I hope this was helpful. And that was my potential fuck up. But now we're doing some really awesome things, expanding to 5 cities, New York, Boston, Ottawa, and Vegas, doing cool shit. So peace out.
Awesome, Nadeem. Thank you so much for
this
sharing
was the cool
that story.
shit part.
Oh.
Anyway.
Awesome. Congratulations on that. Thank you for sharing your story. And I think you summed it up so well. It's all about gratitude and really like putting your fuck up into context and realizing that there's always the next day, and that's something to be grateful for, and you can always move forward and learn from it. So we're just gonna do a couple quick questions because we did go a little bit over time, but let's kick it off. Who wants to ask the first question for Nadeem?
We didn't build it. Yeah, I got out. I had to pay a lot of money, but it wasn't nearly as much as $2 million. It was like this massive poker bluff. So I used to play poker. It wasn't very good, but this was like a time where I'm like across the table from this guy, and I'm like, we're gonna go under if you do this. We won't be able to pay you. We got to give all our investors their money back, which was like half true. they're gonna see this, but whatever, it's done. And just bluffed and it worked, and is what it is.
Hey man, great talk. Thanks so much. Question around the Knowledge Society. Obviously, you're working with some of the brightest youth that are really around today. So when you see the way they are as 16-year-olds and how they think and how they're solving problems, and you think about when you were their age, hopefully there's progression. And can you maybe tell us how you think this generation is different than, let's say, 10 years ago?
So I actually think it's getting tougher. There's a lot more opportunity today. So like a lot of kids complain that there's not as much opportunity today. They're kind of full of shit. Because back in the day, like if you were a software engineer, that was like the next big thing, right? You're like, oh my God, you're probably gonna be like, working at Facebook or Google or whatever. Today, there's like AI, quantum computing, nanotech, gene editing, stem cells, whatever. There's so many more opportunity. The problem is like there's two big problems. One around mental health, and then the second around distraction. So I think the mental health problem is obvious, right? There's like a lot of pressure and more people are talking about it, which is good, but I think there's just more occurrences of it because of like comparing yourself to other people or whatever. And then the second is distraction. So one of the things that I say is like, I don't think people spend enough time doing, and I don't think people spend enough time thinking. So what's left? Like people are just riding the wave. Like these kids are actually just riding the wave, very unintentional. They go every free second, they're just consuming. When you're consuming, you're not thinking, you're not doing. You're just on Instagram, you're doing all this stuff. So a lot of these kids, they come in as just curious, ambitious, willing to put in the work. But how do we train them, right? How do we train them to mature? How do we train them to have the right mindset, skill set, whatever? And so I think that's really the value of TKS is you have a lot of these kids who come in with really good foundations, but maybe are facing a lot of problems that we weren't necessarily facing when we were growing up in high school, and how can you just provide a lot of guidance? I think guidance is way more valuable now than ever before. Think about guidance with like when Bill Gates was like trying to build computers. If you want to build a computer, you go on Amazon, just like order parts, put that shit together, whatever, right? Like you want to solve a problem, whatever, you just Google it. What do you like? You had to go to the scrapyard and like find stuff and like put it together or whatever. There's no Amazon. Like even if you had the best guidance in the world, like what are you gonna do? You don't have access, right? So this is the most interesting time in human history where we have all those different technologies, we have all these opportunities, but I think what's lacking is guidance, and I think that's the most important part. Difference in generation, but a lot more opportunity today.
Awesome. I think somebody else has the mic, so we'll do one more last quick question.
No pressure. My question is, what's the why? Like you figured out what your ambition was, impact 100 million people or whatnot. But what's the why? Like how do you keep yourself going through all that?
So ours was to impact billions. And I'll give you an example. Say you wake up and you have your phone. It's not a waterproof phone, so there's no cop out in this question, okay, or in this scenario. You have a watch, like a really expensive watch, like all the stuff you're wearing is worth like $1,000. You walk outside, you're ready to go to work, and you know those wishing well fountains, right, where like you throw $1 in or something. Say you see this kid, it's like a 2-year-old kid who's playing this wishing well fountain, goes in, tries to pick up $1, falls in, about to drown. No one else is around. What do? You save the kid, right? By the way, I'm waiting for someone to say, like, I just let him go, because then I'm like, well, the whole story is done. I have nothing else to say. But you save the kid, right? Okay. All your stuff gets ruined, thousands of dollars, whatever. You sacrifice. Point is you sacrifice, okay? You buy your phone, you buy your watch or whatever. Next day, you walk outside, you're feeling good, you're walking by the fountain. Maybe it's the same kid, maybe it's a different kid, doesn't matter. He's playing in the wishing well fountain, falls in, about to drown. No one else around. What do? You save the kid, right? Here's my point. It's like we did a lot of development work. And if I asked you, do you like saving the kid? Like what keeps you going to save the kid? You're like, no, I just gotta save the kid. It's my responsibility. It's your duty to save the kid, right? When I was working in all these different places like Bangladesh, East Africa, blah, blah, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, whatever, man, you see all this shit that the world goes through. Like our reality isn't the reality. We live in a bubble, okay? So just as clear as you see that kid and you think that you can pull him out and it's like just as easy for you, even if it's not easy to solve some of these world's most important, but like the initial, like say I walk to the fountain, I break my ankle and slip, right? Or say I can't pull this kid out. The initial impetus, the thing that you felt is, the thing that we feel. It's our responsibility. Like people ask me, like, why do you like working so late? I'm like, can't even answer that. It's just the thing, right? So for us, that's kind of the answer, is seeing that stuff and believing that we can solve it. And then the second piece is gratitude. Like, think about all these people who have a lot of money. What do? They give it back, right? Wait, what did that person say? Hoard it? By the way, don't even get me started on that. I think, like, I have a lot of opinions on that. But yeah, like, a lot of people give it back. Bill and Melinda Gates, Health and Education. Chen Zuck Foundation, whatever, Health and Education. And I think the biggest secret of life, and sorry, Marsha, I'm going a little longer, but this is done. So the biggest secret of life is the highest form of happiness, I think, is gratitude. And I think if you help, if you help other people, that's the best way to demonstrate gratitude, because you're pretty much saying, my life is so damn good that I don't even have to focus on me. I can just help other people. So that's like the best expression of gratitude. So I would say it's those two answers. It's responsibility and...
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nadeem.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I was trying to not make that awkward, but Nadeem, thank you so much for sharing your story. So I think just something to sum up all three of our talks, and let's give another round of applause to all three of our amazing speakers tonight.